We're on the Manx Electric Railway at Derby Station Stop, waiting to go up to Laxey. The Manx Electric Railway opened on the 7th of September 1893. The 17.5-mile route takes you on a journey through stunning coastal and country scenery. The Snaefell Mountain Railway opened on the 21st of August 1895. It was built in just over 7 months, and the line climbs almost to Snaefell summit, 2,036 feet above sea level. And it's certainly very impressive thinking how that was built, and with the brake system that's used. We're at the summit of Snaefell, 2,036 feet high, and as you can see, we can't see a thing, and it's freezing cold. But it took about half an hour to come up on the tram because there were some sheep in the way. Well, we've been to the top of Snaefell on the mountain railway. We were blown to bits, had a coffee, and came back down into Laxey, where it's a very different temperature. These posters give us an indication of what we would have seen if the mist hadn't come down. It wasn't all the way, it was just over the top. But when we went up, it was very, very crowded. But coming down, there weren't so many of us, and it was really very pleasant coming down. But it would have been nice to have seen what we can see here. We've come up to the Great Laxey Wheel, and as you can see, the weather has completely changed, at least it has down here. This is a waterwheel built to remove the water from the Great Laxey mine, and it was opened on the 27th of September 1854, having taken 4 years to build, and it was christened Lady Isabella at the official opening in honour of Lady Hope, who was the wife of the island's Lieutenant Governor. Now, they opened the mine because there was lead ore with a high silver content here, and mined from about 1790. But it also then was found to produce more zinc and copper than all other mines in the British Isles. But of course, the depth of the mine, as the depth of the mine increased, so did the problem of water flooding the lower levels, and it finally closed in 1929. How does this wheel work? Well, it's powered by water drawn from a wide area by channels and collected in the original stone tank on the nearby hillside. A cast iron pipe carries the water underground from this tank to the base of the stone tower. Then water pressure forces it to rise inside the tower to the top. It then runs underneath the viewing platform and spills onto the wheel. This wheel was constructed at a time when the use of water was going and steam was coming in. But on the Isle of Man they didn't have much coal, but they did have plenty of water, which is why it was viable to do that here. And the director was somebody called George Dumbell from North Wales, and it says he was a proud, aggressive, ambitious man. And it was probably he who thought of the idea of putting the symbol of the 3 legs on the wheel, ever the showman. But the engineer was Robert Caseman, who was a local man, and he was a millwright, general engineer, and largely self-taught. And this design was really, the potential of it wasn't properly realised until years after his death. Many miners walked considerable distances to work, some even coming from as far as Laxey. And on a dark winter's morning, a lantern was essential to light the way over the hills. And so they would have a candle fixed with a lump of clay to the front of their hat. Other candles were hung around their necks because there weren't any explosive gases in the Laxey mines. And they probably carried a pick for splitting rocks, some form of explosive, and you might have a sandwich wrapped up in a handkerchief. The waterfall, this is from a 120 metre long tunnel which was completed in 1846 to divert the river away from the engine shaft. It took 4 men 18 months to dig, and the water of the River Moor leaves the tunnel just above the waterfall. By the waterfall is the old adit level, where mining first began in 1790. We are in Port Erin, and we came from Douglas on the old steam train. Quite a journey, an hour chugging through the countryside. Beautiful scenic route. The sun was shining and the smoke was billowing past our windows. It's a beautiful, shiny looking engine and doesn't seem quite big enough to be able to have pulled all those carriages up from Douglas, but obviously it is. We have walked from the railway station in Port Erin down steep hill to the little harbour here, and this was a very popular, Port Erin was very popular during the Victorian times for holiday makers, as we can see looking at the buildings all around, and now it's still a popular destination and a very peaceful scene at the moment. We're climbing up the steep hill out of Port Erin and have come across these lovely banks of bluebells and wildflowers, which bluebells are so around in the Isle of Man, but they're the native bluebells, not the Spanish ones. And there's a little bird at the top of a tree with his calling out to us all the time, and the bees are buzzing. Really is very beautiful. As we continued up this little country lane and rounded another corner, this is what we saw. This very impressive gate and things, and we have it on good authority from a local chap who was travelling in the railway carriage with us that this is or was the home of Nigel Mansell, the racing driver. What a view he has from his home over Port Erin and the sea. We're not far from the village of Cregneash now, and we've stopped at a handy bench to look down to the Calf of Man. We have come to Cregneash village, and it is almost as if time has stood still. The settlement of Cregneash began around 1700, with the earliest homes built from turf with thatched roofs, but over the course of the next century, turf made way for stone. Today, Cregneash may seem to be a place of tranquility, a beautiful living museum for the enjoyment of all. However, life in a traditional Manx crofting village was far different to the romantic notion we may sometimes have. Villagers eked out a precarious existence in what was a much more uncertain and harsh place to live. They farmed their small holdings, many of the men supplementing their income with work on fishing boats, while others undertook trades such as weaving and joinery. Cregneash was only one of several upland areas around the Isle of Man that were settled, but most were later abandoned or reduced in size. However, Cregneash was much nearer to other larger settlements and was on popular walking routes for tourists, and this ultimately helped preserve the village, while other more secluded communities dwindled. The village developed over time. After stone had replaced turf, many of the cottages had a second storey added and loom sheds built. The church farm complex was modernised and expanded, and the early 1900s saw new houses built on the top road. But the community had to wait until 1938 for electricity and until the 1940s for running water. This is Harry's cottage, and the walls of cottages like Harry's were built from stone picked off the fields around the peninsula, and they were held together with clay mortar. And the cottage floor is compacted earth. Harry died in 1935, and he was one of the last generation of native Manx speakers, and his cottage was gifted by his family to the Manx Museum. Most of the furniture and furnishings that we can see here came from Harry's cottage. This is the little bedroom just off from the main room with the earth stone floor. Manx cottages sometimes had rather grand furniture, like this bed here in Harry's cottage, which was purchased at a sale at the farmhouse on the Calf of Man. It was originally a four-poster, but it is said that when the Kelly family brought it back on a boat and tried to get it into the house, they found it was too big and it had to be cut down to a more suitable size. Church Farm was long known as Tumman's Farm, after the family who worked it from the 1800s to 1908. Its 40 or so acres of land made it one of the largest holdings in the village. The farmhouse, for many years one of the largest in the village, probably dates from the late 18th century. It has a living room, a kitchen, a back kitchen, where both washing and dirty work were done, and a dairy with a cool slab. Upstairs there were 2 small and 2 larger bedrooms. Before the church was built, services used to be held in the parlour here, and that's why it came to be known as Church Farm. We are leaving Cregneash now to walk back down to Port Erin. It's a hidden little village where for many years Manx was the language spoken and the farming and crofting customs carried on. And now we can visit it thanks to Manx heritage and appreciate something of what life was like there. We are walking down from Cregneash to Port Erin, and it is really atmospheric seeing the mist. Man a man's cloak descending down upon us, swirling around. As we come to the end of our time on the Isle of Man, it has been good to experience the history, culture and beauty of this small and self-contained island. We have seen Celtic and Viking crosses, medieval castles, a crofting village, and experienced the wonder of the industrial world, all travelling on Victorian transport. Slen liat Ellen Bannon. Goodbye, Isle of Man.